My name is Lauren Campbell. I am 32 years old. And the night my family decided I was disposable started with my brother looking me straight in the eye and saying, "You owe me $150,000. There was no small talk, no warming up, just that number tossed across my kitchen table like it was nothing, like it was not more than half of everything I had scraped together since college. Working late nights in tech while everyone else celebrated holidays and long weekends. And when I did not answer right away, he pushed his chair back and said, "Len, this is what family is for. You are single. You do not have kids. Your money should be helping the people who actually need it." I heard my own voice come out flatter than I felt. "No, I am not giving you my savings." And I watched his expression twist from fake warmth to open anger. And in that tiny pause, I realized I was done playing the quiet, reasonable one. So, while he was still listing all the ways I was ungrateful, I opened my laptop, pulled up my email, and clicked on the offer letter from the Berlin startup that had been sitting in my inbox for a week. My new salary, my relocation package, my one-way ticket out of this constant obligation. All right, there. And, snorts, I thought either I choose them forever or I finally choose myself. He was still talking about his dream house and how our parents already understood the plan when I went on the airline site, scrolled past the round-trip options, and bought a one-way ticket out of Austin for 6 days from now instead of the month I had originally planned. Then I turned my phone face down on the table because I could feel a text coming from my father before it even arrived. The kind of message that sounds like concern, but is really a threat dressed as advice. "Before I tell you what he said and what happened after I walked out, tell me what time is it for you right now and where are you watching from? I'm curious to see how far this story will travel." By the time that Tuesday afternoon rolled around, the Berlin job had already gone from dream to concrete plan in my head. I had resigned from my role as a senior software engineer at a health tech startup in Austin. I had a work visa in process, a lease that my landlord had agreed to let me end early, and a spreadsheet breaking down exactly how my savings and stock options would cover the move. So, when my phone lit up with my brother's name, I almost let it go to voicemail. But years of conditioning kicked in and I answered, "Hey, Lauren, you busy?" he asked using that upbeat tone that always meant he wanted something. And before I could say I was reviewing code for a release, he launched in. "So big news. Megan and I found the perfect house. 4 bedrooms near the best schools, space for mom and dad to visit. It is exactly what we have been talking about." I could hear how excited he was and for a second I almost relaxed. Then he added, "There is just one thing. We are short on the down payment and Dad mentioned you have been sitting on a ton of cash," which sounded less like a compliment and more like an accusation. So I asked, careful, "How short are you?" He did not hesitate. $150,000. That gets us where we need to be and you are moving to Europe anyway. What do you even need all that for? Rent is cheaper there and your company is paying half your relocation. And suddenly my own plan sounded like a silly little trip the way he said it. I reminded him calmly that I had been working in tech for nearly a decade. That this Berlin position was a step into engineering leadership and not some semester abroad. That my offer was signed. But he laughed it off. "Lauren, you can push your move a little. You have always been the flexible one. Help us get this house locked in. I will pay you back as soon as my bonus hits. Dad already said he is proud of me for taking this step. He just thinks you are being weird about money." That last part hit harder than it should have because that was the theme of my entire childhood. Ryan took big swings and everyone clapped. I kept things running and people barely noticed. And on the phone that day, it started all over again. Only with 6 figures attached this time instead of $10 bills. When I told him no, that my savings were not a community pool. The line went quiet. Then he lowered his voice the way he always did before a blow landed. "So you would rather chase some foreign job than make sure your family has a place to live? Do you know how selfish that sounds?" And before I could answer, he hung up. It did not take long for my father to call after that. His name popping up with the same dread I used to feel when a teacher called home. "Lauren," he said, not bothering with hello. "Your brother tells me you refuse to help. Do you understand what this house means? They are starting a family. They need stability. You can work in computers from anywhere. I tried to explain the contract, the timeline, the fact that this was the opportunity one had been grinding towards since I was 22, but he cut me off. You do not have children. You have no mortgage. Your brother is stepping up, and you are acting like a teenager running away to Europe for fun. We did not raise you to turn your back on blood. After that call with my father ended in a burst of static and the kind of disappointed silence I knew too well, I sat at my desk and opened the Berlin contract again, scrolling through the details I already had memorized, the equity package, the salary that was almost double what I made in Austin, the expectation that I would lead a distributed team of engineers across 3 countries. And as I read, I could feel this thin layer of guilt peeling back to show what was underneath. Not anger exactly, more like a sharp, calm awareness that if I gave in now, I would never stop paying for my brother's choices. So, I clicked over to my email and wrote to the HR manager asking if there was any flexibility on my start date, explaining that I could actually move sooner than planned. Then I went straight to the airline site and with my heart pounding in my ears, changed my ticket to leave in 6 days. One way, no backup plan. That was when my phone buzzed with a text from my father, the kind that made my hands shake before I even opened it. Sign off on your brother's mortgage as a cosigner or do not bother coming back. Your mother agrees. We are siding with him on this. And the words sat there on my screen like a contract I had never signed. And I realized this was not about helping with a down payment anymore. They wanted my credit score, my clean history, my name on a massive loan for a house I would never live in. I typed and deleted 3 different responses before sending the only one that felt honest. I will not co-sign for anyone. If that means I am not welcome, I understand. And almost instantly he replied, then you are choosing money over family. Do not contact us again. Something in me cracked at that. But instead of crumbling, it felt like a trapdoor finally closing. So I opened my banking app and started going through every account with a new set of eyes. Savings, checking, retirement, the stock account I had opened after my second promotion. And then I saw it. A credit card I barely used with a balance that made my stomach flip. Thousands spent at electronic stores, high-end restaurants, sports gear, all in the last month. And I remembered that 5 years earlier when Ryan was trying to build credit for a small business idea, I had added him as an authorized user so he could book some equipment. Just for a few months, he had said, I will barely touch it, and then we both forgot. Now the card was nearly at its limit and the timing lined up perfectly with the weeks he had been working up to his big ask. So while my brother was probably sitting somewhere telling people how I betrayed him, I was on the phone with the card company saying, I need to remove an authorized user I no longer trust, and I want to dispute recent charges that were made without my permission. While I waited on hold, I logged into my bank and ran another search. This time, checking beneficiary designations. And there it was again. His name on a savings account I had opened when I was 25. Listed as the person who would inherit it if something happened to me. Another favor from years ago when everyone insisted it was just extra protection for the family. And suddenly it did not feel like protection at all. It felt like I had left my financial front door wide open for someone who was now pounding on it. By the time the representative came back and confirmed that Ryan had been removed from the card and that the charges would be temporarily reversed during their investigation, I had already filled out forms to change every beneficiary. And when midnight rolled around, I had changed passwords, set up new 2-step security on everything, and pulled his access from every shared account he could possibly touch. How my laptop glowing in the dark while my phone lit up over and over with incoming calls. I refused to answer until the voicemail icon showed more than 30 missed attempts and one text popped up from my brother that made my chest go cold. Snorts, if you think you can just walk away from us after this, you are going to regret it for the rest of your life. The next morning, I let my phone buzz on the counter while I made coffee because I already knew what was waiting for me there. And when I finally picked it up, there were notifications stacked all the way down the screen. Dozens of missed calls, more texts than I could count at a glance, messages from my mother, my brother, unrecognized numbers that I knew were cousins or family friends drafted into the campaign. And I opened them one by one like ripping off bandages. You are tearing this family apart. From my mother in the middle of the night, we needed that card for closing costs. You ruined everything from Ryan. Real sisters do not act like this. From a number I did not recognize that turned out to be Megan. And somewhere in there, my father left a voicemail saying he hoped my foreign job kept me warm when I was old and alone, which I did not have the energy to listen to all the way through. Around 9 o'clock in the morning, while I was trying to focus on packing lists and visa paperwork, my phone rang again with an unfamiliar number, and against my better judgment, I answered, "Len, this is Megan." My brother's wife said, skipping over any pretense of small talk. "I know things got intense yesterday, but we really just need to sit down like adults. The house is for our future kids, for your parents to visit. You are not just saying no to us. You are saying no to them having a place where the whole family can be together." There it was, the new angle. My boundaries framed as an attack on elderly relatives and hypothetical children. So I asked her as evenly as I could if she thought it was acceptable that Ryan had been using my credit card without telling me while planning to ask for $150,000 on top of it. And there was a long pause before she said, "He thought it was still like a family card that he did not realize you would be so upset. He was just trying to get things ready for the house." Which was exactly the kind of excuse I had heard my entire life. Bad choices dressed up as good intentions. And when I told her that I was not changing my mind, she sighed and said, "You know he will never forgive you for this." An hour later, my cousin Eric texted asking if he could stop by. And when he showed up at my door with coffee, he did not launch into any speech. He just looked around at the half-packed boxes and said, "So, they really pushed you this far." Then he told me how my father had called his mother the night before, painting this picture of me abandoning the family in their hour of need, and how his own childhood with Ryan had been full of little setups that somehow always ended with Eric being blamed. "Do you remember that summer when Aunt Susan's bracelet went missing and everyone thought I stole it?" he asked. And I honestly did not until he reminded me that it later turned up in Ryan's gym bag. They said it was a mix-up, but I knew he planted it and no one wanted to hear it because he was the golden boy. Hearing that did not fix anything, but it made me feel less alone, like I was not crazy for seeing a pattern. And after Eric left, I finally answered a video call from my old college roommate Kristen, who had seen my cryptic social media post about Clear's throat moving and wanted the full story. I told her about the $150,000, the cosign demand, the credit card, the beneficiary thing I had forgotten about, and she just shook her head. "Lauren, you have always been the responsible one. You were the person who triple checked every bill in our apartment. The idea that you are suddenly reckless because you do not want to bankroll a house you will never live in is insane." And hearing someone say it out loud loosened something in my chest I had not realized I was holding that night. Just when I thought the worst of the messages had passed, an email from Ryan landed in my inbox with the subject line, "Since you clearly forgot," and in it he laid out this dramatic story about how he had supposedly used his graduation money to help pay for my coding boot camp when our parents refused, how he had always believed in my potential and now I was repaying him by abandoning the family. And for a second I doubted my own memory until I went into an old folder of tax documents and bank statements and saw the truth in black and white: scholarships, a small loan in my own name, a check from our grandmother, and nothing from him because his graduation money had gone to a sports car he totaled in less than a year. And the realization that he had either convinced himself of his own lie or assumed I would never check sent a chill through me that no angry voicemail ever could. In the 4 days between that email and my flight to Berlin, my life in Austin shrank down to suitcases and final signatures. During the day, I bounced between my apartment, my office, and a storage unit, closing out my job, training my replacement, handing back my access card. While at night, I fielded a rotating cast of people trying to talk me out of what they all called my overreaction until my landlord, Mrs. Green, an older woman who had seen me come and go with takeout and laptops for 3 years, stopped by as I was hauling boxes to the hall and said, "I heard you were moving overseas." "I did that once when I was your age. Best choice I ever made. Do not let anyone scare you into staying put." And that small unsolicited encouragement from someone who was not tangled up in our family drama studied me more than any pep talk. My final day at the office, my manager made a point of telling the team how much value I had brought, how Berlin was lucky to have me. And as I looked around at coworkers who knew me as competent, not selfish, I felt the split between how my family framed me and how the rest of the world saw me grow wider by the hour. That afternoon, my phone buzzed again with a number I did not recognize. And this time, it was Andrew, Megan's older brother, who I had seen at holidays, but never spoken to much. "I know I am probably the last person you want to hear from," he started. "But I wanted to talk to you without Ryan around." We met at a coffee shop near my office, and he sat down looking tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "Jason and I are supposed to be leaning on you to fix this," he said. "But I cannot in good conscience do that. I have been watching Ryan and Megan live way beyond their means for years. Maxed out cards, car loans for vehicles they cannot afford, crypto stuff they do not understand, your father bailing them out every time. And when Ryan told me you were investing in their house, I told him he was playing with fire. Then he told me something that made my skin crawl. How Ryan had joked about how easy it would be to qualify for a bigger mortgage if he had my numbers on the application. How he had casually mentioned knowing enough of my personal information to make it work if I got stubborn. And even though Andrew said he had pushed back and told him that was over the line, the idea that my own brother was talking about using my identity like a tool sat in my stomach like a rock. That night, as I sat on the floor of my half-empty living room, my suitcase open, my laptop propped on a box, my Aunt Linda called. My mother's older sister, who had always been blunt in a way that made people uncomfortable. "Your mom asked me to talk some sense into you," she said. And I braced for another round of guilt. But instead, she went on, "I am not doing that. I am calling to say I am proud of you for finally drawing a line." She told me about growing up with my mother and an older brother who sounds a lot like Ryan. How the oldest boy could do no wrong. How my grandparents drained savings to keep rescuing him from one bad decision after another. And how my mother swore she would never repeat that pattern. But she did, Linda said softly. She just changed the names and you ended up being the one they leaned on because you were stable. That is not love. That is convenience. When I admitted I was scared, that part of me wondered if I would regret all of this. She said something I have repeated to myself ever since. If you are going to regret something, better to regret putting yourself first than regret letting other people burn your entire life down. After we hung up, as I double-checked my passport and my flight details, one last text came from my father. A final attempt to twist the knife. "When you get on that plane, do not bother coming back to this house. You made your decision. Remember that when you have no one left and instead of crying or calling or typing out a long defense, I scrolled to the top of our family group thread, muted it, then blocked each of their numbers one by one until the screen went quiet. And a few hours later, I was in a rideshare heading to the airport with everything I owned either in my suitcase, in storage, or locked behind passwords my brother would never guess. Landing in Berlin felt less like arriving in a foreign country and more like stepping into a version of my life that had been waiting for me to claim it. Within a week, I had a temporary apartment arranged by the company, a transit card, and a desk in an open-plan office where my new supervisor, Sophia, walked me through the systems I would be responsible for. "We hired you because you are calm when things get complicated," she said during my first one-on-one. "We need that here." And the way she said it as a strength and not a reason to give me everybody else's work made something tight in my chest unclench. The days were packed with code reviews, architecture meetings, and late afternoon walks back to my place along streets that still felt like a movie set, and a few weeks in a colleague recommended an English-speaking therapist, Dr. Rebecca Owens, who specialized in people starting over far from home. So I booked an appointment thinking we would talk about culture shock and instead spent most of the first session describing my brother's demand for $150,000, my parents' ultimatum, and the way my family had always framed my efforts as overreacting while treating his as bold. "You talk about your family's needs as if they are laws of nature," Dr. Owens observed. "But what you are describing are preferences, expectations, not emergencies." And that single sentence stayed with me long after I left her office, echoing, snorts, whenever I caught, clear's throat, myself thinking I had abandoned them. A month after I moved, jet lag and onboarding had settled enough that I remembered the American phone I had shoved in a drawer and left on airplane mode. So, one Sunday afternoon, I switched it on and watched delayed messages flood in. Old voicemails, long walls of text, emails forwarded from relatives. And buried in the noise was a short message from my cousin Eric with a link to a real estate listing and the note, "House fell through. They are blaming you publicly. Thought you should see." So I clicked, saw the word "sale terminated," and then opened social media to find my brother posting vague quotes about selfish siblings and family who turn their back when times get tough with enough detail that anyone who knew us could do the math. A week later I got a LinkedIn message from someone I had not thought about since high school, Tyler Jenkins, who had been one of Ryan's business partners years back. "Hi Lauren. I hope this is not weird, but I have been following a bit of what is going on from a distance. I used to work with Ryan and I feel like I owe you this," he wrote. And when we got on a video call, he laid out stories that sounded eerily familiar. Ryan borrowing money for short-term investments that never got repaid, putting joint expenses on cards without telling anyone, then acting hurt when called out. He counts on people not wanting to make a scene. Tyler said, "You are the first person in your family who stood up to him. Everyone else just folds." Hearing that from someone outside the family bubble made me almost dizzy with validation. And it made what happened next feel less like an isolated attack and more like part of a pattern. One evening, I came home from work to an email from a bank in the States I did not recognize, flagged as important. "We are contacting you to verify a recent loan application submitted in your name." It began listing out partial details that included my old address in Austin, my date of birth, and an application for a personal loan large enough to make my throat go dry. And at the bottom, it said the application had been stopped because some information did not match their records. When I called using every international minute my plan allowed, the fraud department walked me through what had been entered. And when I heard my brother's phone number listed as the primary contact, something inside me that had still been making excuses for him went quiet. Not only had he considered using my identity like Andrew had warned, he had actually tried it after I left. After the card, after the beneficiary changes, as if he still believed he was entitled to my future, the bank flagged it for investigation. I filed a report. And when I hung up, I sat on the floor of my Berlin apartment for a long time, not crying, just absorbing the fact that if I had not closed those doors before I got on that plane, my life could have been buried under debts I did not create. About a year after I moved, right as our team was celebrating landing a huge contract that would keep me in Berlin for at least another couple of years, an email from Aunt Linda popped up in my personal inbox with a subject line that made my pulse jump. "Thought you would want to know." And inside were 3 short paragraphs that read more like a report than family gossip. "Your parents helped Ryan and Megan get into a smaller house after the first deal collapsed." She wrote, "They cashed out a big portion of their retirement to co-sign and cover part of the down payment against my advice, and now the bank is taking the property back because payments have not been made in months." She went on to explain that in the course of the foreclosure process, documents had been reviewed more closely, signatures compared, and the bank had flagged discrepancies that suggested Ryan had simplified some paperwork by signing on behalf of my parents without their knowledge. "There is a formal investigation. There may be charges. Your father is furious, but mostly at himself, though he would never admit that to you," she added. "I know you will hear a version of this eventually, and I wanted you to have facts, not just accusations." A few weeks later, Eric confirmed what Linda had hinted at, sending me a link to a local news article about irregularities in mortgage documents. No names printed, but enough details that I could fill in the blanks, along with a simple line, "He did this to himself." Word filtered through cousins that Megan had taken the kids and moved in with her parents, that her family had discovered more debts and accounts and collections than anyone knew about. That Ryan had lost his job in sales when his employer found out he was under investigation for financial misconduct. And that my parents, pushed past what even their denial could handle, had moved out of the suburban house they loved into a cramped rental apartment after liquidating what was left of their savings, trying to keep him afloat. It did not make me happy to picture my parents in a small place counting dollars. But it also did not make me feel responsible because every fork in that road had come with a chance to choose differently. And they had chosen him every single time, even when the cost was their own security. Eventually, a letter made it through the digital walls I had built. An actual envelope forwarded from my old address in Austin to the company's European office. My name written in my mother's uneven script. Inside was a short note saying she missed me, that things had been hard, and a longer one from my father that never used the words apology or regret. Only phrases like family should stick together in tough times. And if you had helped when we asked, none of this would have happened. Ending with a request for a small loan to help with my brother's legal fees and get my parents back on their feet. I read it twice, then a third time, checking to see if I had missed even a single sentence that acknowledged what they had said to me before I left. What Ryan had tried to do with my identity, how many chances they had to see him clearly. And when I found nothing but entitlement dressed up as desperation, I sat down at my laptop and drafted a reply that was only 3 lines long. I am sorry for the situation you are in. I hope you can find support and solutions that do not involve me. I will not be sending money or involving myself in Ryan's choices. Then I signed my name, printed it, mailed it to the return address, and blocked the forwarding service that had let their letter reach me in the first place. In therapy, when I told Dr. Owens about it, I half expected her to tell me I was being harsh, but she just asked, if you said yes, now, what would stop this from happening again and again? And the answer, of course, was nothing. Because the only thing that had ever limited how much they would take from me was my willingness to say no. These days, my life is built around people who understand that family is a word you earn with behavior, snorts, not a free membership card to someone else's bank account. My closest circle in Berlin includes coworkers, neighbors, and friends who showed up for me in ways my own brother never did. I mentor junior engineers who remind me of myself at 22, eager and a little afraid. And when the topic of family drama comes up over drinks after work and someone jokes about being the responsible one, I tell my story in broad strokes, always ending in the same place with the moment I chose a one-way ticket and a locked credit report over a lifetime of cleaning up other people's messes. Somewhere back in Texas, my brother is living in a rented room. No house, no job in his old field. A strange relationship with parents who finally ran out of things to sacrifice for him. And as far as I know, he still tells anyone who will listen that I betrayed him. But that story no longer has any power over me because the reality is simple. I did not ruin his life by saying no. He did that on his own. And the only thing I destroyed was his ability to keep using me as his safety.